can't wait to see you tonight.
Oh, Ryan. I didn't hear you.
Who were you talking to?
The first crack in my perfect marriage appeared on a Tuesday morning when I found my wife, Lisa, whispering into her phone in our walk-in closet, speaking in a voice I'd never heard before. Soft, intimate, guilty. "I can't wait to see you tonight," she murmured, completely unaware I was standing in the doorway. Ryan won't suspect anything. He's been working late all week. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Ryan Carter, and until that moment, I thought I had everything figured out. At 39, I was a successful corporate lawyer in Dallas, married to the most beautiful woman in our affluent suburb, father to 2 amazing kids, living in a house that belonged on magazine covers. Lisa had always been the perfect wife, elegant, charming, the kind of woman who made other men envious and other women want to be her friend. But standing there, listening to her plan some secret rendezvous, I felt my world tilt sideways. When she finally noticed me, her face went white. "Oh, Ryan, I didn't hear you come up." "Who were you talking to?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite the hammering in my chest. "Just Melissa," she said quickly, sliding the phone into her robe pocket. "Planning the charity gala next month. You know how these events require so much coordination." I nodded, but something felt wrong. Lisa had been distant lately, coming home late, taking calls in private, spending hours getting ready for what she claimed were book club meetings and girls' brunches. The woman who used to greet me with kisses now barely looked up from her phone when I walked through the door. "Which charity again?" I asked. She hesitated for just a split second too long. "The Children's Hospital Foundation, the one I told you about last week." I didn't remember any conversation about a children's hospital foundation, but I let it slide. Maybe I'd been working too much, missing important details about her life. Corporate law was demanding, especially when you were trying to make partner at one of Dallas's most prestigious firms. That evening, I made an effort to reconnect. I came home early with flowers and her favorite wine, suggesting we order takeout and watch a movie like we used to do before kids and careers consumed our lives. "That sounds lovely," Lisa said, but she kept checking her phone throughout dinner. Every buzz made her jump slightly, and she'd glance at the screen with an expression I couldn't quite read, anticipation mixed with something that looked like guilt. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Of course, just coordinating with the other volunteers." She set the phone face down on the table, but I noticed her fingers kept twitching toward it. During the movie, she excused herself twice to check on the kids, but I could hear her whispering in the hallway. When she returned the second time, her cheeks were flushed and her eyes were brighter than they'd been in months. That night, lying in bed beside her, I stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of what I was feeling. Suspicion was an ugly emotion, one I'd never associated with my marriage. Lisa and I had been together for 12 years, married for 10. We'd built this life together, weathered the challenges of young parenthood, celebrated each other's successes. But as I listened to her breathing beside me, too quick and shallow for sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that the woman I'd fallen in love with was disappearing, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. The next morning brought our weekly neighborhood barbecue at the Hendersons' house. These gatherings had become a tradition in our subdivision, a chance for all the couples to catch up, let the kids play together, and maintain the social bonds that made our community feel special. I was manning the grill with Tom Henderson when I spotted Lisa across the yard, deep in conversation with Alan Becker. Alan was my old college friend who'd moved to our neighborhood 2 years ago after his messy divorce. He'd been struggling financially and socially since then, and I'd tried to help him get back on his feet by introducing him to potential real estate clients and including him in our social circle. Now, watching them together, I noticed things I'd somehow missed before. The way Alan leaned in when he spoke to her, How Lisa's laugh seemed different around him, more musical, more flirtatious. The subtle touches that lasted just a moment too long. "Your wife and Alan seem to get along well," Tom commented, following my gaze. "Yeah," I said, flipping burgers with more force than necessary. "They're both working on some charity event together." Tom raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. The awkward silence said enough. I decided to join their conversation, walking over with 2 fresh beers. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything important," I said, handing Alan a bottle. "Just discussing the fundraiser," Lisa said quickly. "Alan has some great ideas for attracting donors." "Really? I didn't know you had experience with charity work, Alan." Alan's smile looked forced. "I'm learning as I go. Lisa's been teaching me a lot." "I bet she has." There was an uncomfortable pause before Lisa excused herself to help in the kitchen. Alan and I stood there, the tension thick between us. "She's a special woman," Alan said finally. "You're lucky to have her." "Yes, I am," I replied, studying his face. "I'd do anything to protect what we have." Something flickered in Alan's eyes, fear, maybe, or guilt. Of course, that's what marriage is about, right? Protecting each other. Exactly, from anyone who might try to come between us. That night, after the kids were asleep, I confronted Lisa directly. "Is there something going on between you and Alan?" She was brushing her hair at the vanity, and her hand froze mid-stroke. In the mirror, I could see her face go pale. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you having an affair?" She spun around, her eyes wide with what looked like genuine shock. "Ryan, how could you even ask me that?" "Because you've been acting strange for weeks. The secretive phone calls, the late nights, the way you two were looking at each other today." "You're being paranoid," she said, but her voice wavered. "Alan and I are friends. That's all. We're working together on this charity event, and yes, we talk frequently, but there's nothing inappropriate about it." "Then why do I feel like you're lying to me?" She stood up, wrapping her robe tighter around herself. "Because you're under a lot of stress at work, and you're looking for problems where none exist. I love you, Ryan. I love our family. I would never do anything to jeopardize that." She came to me then, putting her arms around my neck, looking up at me with those green eyes that had captivated me since college. "I'm sorry if I've been distracted lately. Planning this event has been more complicated than I expected. But there's nothing going on with Alan or anyone else. You have to believe me." I wanted to believe her. God, how I wanted to believe her. So I held her close and told myself that my suspicions were just stress-induced paranoia, that my perfect wife was still perfect, that my perfect life was still intact. But as we lay in bed that night, Lisa fell asleep quickly for the first time in weeks, as if confessing her innocence had given her peace. I, on the other hand, stared at the ceiling until dawn, knowing with absolute certainty that everything she'd told me was a lie. The question now wasn't whether my wife was cheating on me. The question was what I was going to do about it. I've always believed that information is power, and as a lawyer, I know the importance of building a solid case before making any accusations. So instead of confronting Lisa again, or having it out with Alan, I decided to do what I do best: investigate. The first step was hiring a private investigator. I couldn't use anyone from my usual network of legal contacts. This needed to be completely confidential. After some discreet research, I found Marcus Webb, a former Dallas police detective who specialized in domestic investigations. Marcus was exactly what I expected: grizzled, cynical, and expensive. His office in a strip mall near downtown smelled like stale coffee and cigarettes, and his desk was covered with case files that made me grateful for my problem's relative simplicity. "Cheating spouse?" he asked, before I'd even sat down. "Suspected cheating spouse," I corrected. "I need proof before I make any decisions." "Smart man. Too many guys go off half-cocked and end up screwing themselves in divorce court. He pulled out a standard contract. My rate is $500 a day plus expenses. Most cases like this take about a week to resolve, one way or the other. What exactly will you do? Surveillance, mostly. Follow her, photograph any meetings, document patterns of behavior. If she's cheating, I'll get you evidence that will hold up in court. If she's not, you'll have peace of mind. I signed the contract and wrote him a check, feeling simultaneously guilty and relieved. Part of me hoped Marcus would find nothing, that my suspicions were unfounded and I could return to my blissfully ignorant marriage. But a larger part of me needed to know the truth, whatever it might be. While Marcus began his surveillance, I started paying closer attention to Lisa's behavior at home. I began noting when she left the house, when she returned, and what explanations she gave for her absences. I checked our phone records and credit card statements, looking for patterns or unusual charges. What I found was disturbing. Over the past 2 months, Lisa had been making frequent purchases at Victoria's Secret, expensive lingerie that I'd never seen her wear. She'd been going to a salon in a part of town she had no reason to visit, getting treatments that weren't reflected in our usual household budget. Most tellingly, she'd been using cash for many purchases, something she'd never done before. The phone records were even more revealing. There were dozens of calls to a number I didn't recognize, often lasting an hour or more. When I reverse-searched the number, it came back to Alan Becker. 3 days after hiring Marcus, he called with his first report. "Your wife is definitely seeing someone," he said without preamble. "I've got photos of her meeting a man at the Ritz-Carlton downtown. They had lunch, then went up to a room together. She was there for 3 hours. My stomach dropped. Hearing the confirmation felt like being punched in the gut, even though I'd been expecting it. "Can you identify the man?" "Tall, brown hair, drives a silver BMW. I can get a clearer photo if you need it, but from your description it sounds like your friend Alan." "It's him," I said quietly. "What else?" "They're not being particularly careful. They meet twice a week, always at the same hotel. She tells the front desk she's Mrs. Becker, and they've got a standing reservation. This has been going on for at least 6 weeks, probably longer." 6 weeks. While I'd been working late to provide for our family, while I'd been planning our anniversary trip, while I'd been helping our kids with homework and believing I was living in a happy marriage, my wife had been playing house with my former best friend. "I need more," I told Marcus. "I need to know everything. How they communicate, where else they meet, what they're planning. You sure about that? Sometimes it's better not to know all the details." "I'm sure." Over the next week, Marcus painted a complete picture of my wife's betrayal. Lisa and Alan weren't just having an affair, they were planning a future together. Marcus had recorded conversations where they discussed Lisa divorcing me and taking half of everything I'd worked for. They laughed about how clueless I was, how easy it had been to fool me. The worst part was a recording Marcus had made of them at dinner, where Lisa mocked my explicit performance and complained about how boring our marriage had become. She called me predictable and emotionally unavailable, painting herself as a victim trapped in a loveless marriage rather than a cheater destroying her family. "The guy's got financial problems," Marcus added. "Looks like he sees your wife as his meal ticket. He's been telling her about all the money he'll make once his real estate business takes off, but from what I can see, he's barely staying afloat. He needs her divorce settlement to save himself from bankruptcy." That detail stung almost as much as the affair itself. Alan wasn't just stealing my wife. He was planning to steal my money to solve his own problems. The man I'd tried to help, the friend I'd welcomed into our community, was systematically destroying my life for his own financial gain. But Marcus saved the worst revelation for last. "There's something else," he said during our final meeting. "Your wife's friend Melissa is involved too. She's been helping coordinate their meetings, providing alibis, even booking hotel rooms. From what I can tell, she's encouraging the affair and pushing your wife toward divorce." I sat in Marcus's dingy office, staring at photos of my wife kissing another man, listening to recordings of her mocking our marriage, and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. The hurt was still there, but it was being overshadowed by something else. Anger. Not the hot, explosive anger that makes people do stupid things, but the cold, calculating anger of someone who's been systematically betrayed by the people he trusted most. The kind of anger that doesn't seek immediate satisfaction, but instead plans for maximum impact. "What are you going to do?" Marcus asked. "I'm going to make them pay," I said quietly. "All of them." "Be careful, Ryan. Revenge can get messy and you've got kids to think about." "I'm not talking about violence," I assured him. "I'm talking about justice. They want to destroy my life and steal my money? Fine. But they're going to learn that I'm not as helpless as they think I am." That night, I sat in my home office, surrounded by evidence of my wife's betrayal, and began planning my response. Lisa, Alan, and Melissa had spent months plotting against me, thinking I was too naive and trusting to catch on. They'd underestimated me completely. They were about to learn that the quiet, hard-working husband they'd dismissed so easily was actually a very dangerous enemy to have. The beauty of being a corporate lawyer is that you learn to think several moves ahead, to anticipate your opponent's strategy and counter it before they even know they're playing a game. Lisa, Alan, and Melissa thought they were playing me for a fool, but they'd actually handed me all the ammunition I needed to destroy them. My first priority was protecting my assets. If Lisa was planning to divorce me and take half of everything, I needed to make sure there wasn't as much everything as she expected. I began by restructuring my finances in ways that were completely legal, but would significantly reduce what she could claim in a divorce settlement. I moved money into retirement accounts that were harder to divide, paid off debts early to reduce our net worth on paper, and made strategic investments in my law firm that would increase my future earning potential while decreasing my current liquid assets. The most important move was setting up a trust fund for our children's education. I transferred a substantial amount of money into an irrevocable trust that could only be used for their schooling and wouldn't be subject to division in a divorce. To any outside observer, including Lisa, it looked like a responsible father planning for his children's future. In reality, it was me moving money beyond her reach. While I was quietly rearranging our finances, I also began documenting Lisa's behavior more systematically. I installed security cameras around our house, ostensibly for protection, but actually to record her comings and goings. I kept detailed logs of her lies and contradictions. Most importantly, I began recording our conversations whenever possible. Texas is a one-party consent state, which means I could legally record any conversation I was part of without telling the other person. It's a law that saved many lawyers' careers, and now it was going to save my marriage, or at least my half of the assets. The first test of my new strategy came when Lisa announced she was going to visit her sister in Houston for the weekend. "It's been so long since we've had quality time together," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Sarah's going through a rough patch with her divorce, and she really needs support." I nodded sympathetically. "That sounds like exactly what she needs. You're such a good sister." What Lisa didn't know was that I'd already called her sister. Sarah was indeed going through a divorce, but she was spending the weekend at a meditation retreat, trying to find inner peace. She had no idea Lisa was planning to visit. Instead, thanks to Marcus's continued surveillance, I knew Lisa was planning to spend the weekend at a bed and breakfast in Austin with Alan. They'd booked a romantic suite and made dinner reservations at the city's most expensive restaurant. Rather than confront her about the lie, I decided to use it to my advantage. "You know what?" I said. "I think I'll take the kids camping this weekend, give you and Sarah some uninterrupted sister time, and give me a chance to bond with Jake and Emma." Lisa's face lit up with relief and what might have been genuine gratitude. "That's so thoughtful of you. Sarah will really appreciate not having to worry about entertaining the kids. It's the least I can do for family." That Friday, I took Jake and Emma to a campground about an hour outside Dallas. We had a great time, hiking, fishing, roasting marshmallows, and sleeping under the stars. For a few hours, I almost forgot about the drama waiting for me at home. But Saturday morning, I put the second phase of my plan into action. While Lisa and Alan were enjoying their romantic weekend, I drove to Alan's house with a locksmith and a court order. As Lisa's attorney, she'd hired me to handle some legal paperwork months earlier, giving me legitimate access to her affairs. I had the right to inspect any property that might be relevant to her financial situation. What we found in Alan's home office was even better than I'd hoped. Alan wasn't just having an affair with my wife, he was running a sophisticated real estate scam. He'd been selling properties to clients, then using forged documents to take out second mortgages on the same properties. The money from these fraudulent loans was funding his lifestyle and his affair with Lisa. I photographed everything: the forged documents, the falsified financial statements, the bank records showing where the money had gone. Then, I carefully put everything back exactly as we'd found it. By the time Lisa returned from her sister visit on Sunday evening, I had enough evidence to send Alan to prison for fraud and to prove that Lisa had been lying to me for months. But I wasn't ready to play those cards yet. Instead, I greeted my wife with a warm hug and asked about her weekend. "How's Sarah doing?" I asked. "Was she happy to see you?" "Oh, you know Sarah," Lisa said vaguely. "She's working through her feelings. It was good for her to have someone to talk to." "I'm sure it was. Did you two do anything special?" "Just talked, mostly. Went for walks, very low-key." I nodded, mentally adding another lie to my growing collection. "Well, I'm glad you could be there for her. Family is so important." "How was camping?" "Great. The kids loved it. Jake caught his first fish, and Emma learned to build a fire. We should do it more often." "That sounds wonderful," Lisa said, but she was already reaching for her phone. "I should call Sarah and make sure she's okay after our emotional weekend." "Good idea. I'll get the kids ready for school tomorrow." As I helped Jake and Emma unpack their camping gear, I could hear Lisa in the kitchen, having a hushed conversation that definitely wasn't with her sister. She was probably telling Alan about her weekend, maybe even talking about me and how easy I was to deceive. Let her think that, I decided. Let them both think I was the same trusting, naive husband they'd been fooling for months. It would make their eventual downfall that much more satisfying. That night, as Lisa slept peacefully beside me, probably dreaming about her romantic weekend, I lay awake planning my next moves. I had evidence of Alan's fraud, documentation of Lisa's lies, and a financial structure that would protect most of my assets from a divorce settlement. But I wasn't ready to end this yet. Lisa and Alan had humiliated me, betrayed my trust, and planned to steal my money. A simple divorce wouldn't be enough. I wanted them to experience the same kind of systematic destruction they'd planned for me. I wanted them to know what it felt like to lose everything they cared about, to be betrayed by someone they trusted, to watch their perfect plans crumble around them. I wanted them to crawl. The next phase of my plan required patience and precision. I couldn't just destroy Lisa and Alan. I needed to do it in a way that looked like natural consequences of their own actions. The best revenge is the kind where your enemies defeat themselves. My first target was Alan's real estate business. Using the evidence I'd gathered from his office, I began anonymously tipping off his victims. I created an untraceable email account and started sending carefully worded messages to people who'd bought properties from Alan, suggesting they might want to double-check their paperwork and mortgage documents. Within a week, 3 different clients had discovered the fraudulent second mortgages on their properties. They contacted the police, the State Real Estate Commission, and their lawyers. Alan suddenly found himself under investigation by multiple agencies and facing potential criminal charges. I watched from a distance as his world began to crumble. He canceled appointments, spent hours on the phone with lawyers, and started drinking heavily. The stress was visible on his face every time I saw him around the neighborhood. But the most satisfying part was watching how the investigation affected his relationship with Lisa. She'd been attracted to Alan partly because he represented excitement and financial security, a successful businessman who could give her the lifestyle she wanted. Now that he was facing potential prison time and financial ruin, he wasn't quite as appealing. I could see the doubt creeping into Lisa's behavior. She was still seeing Alan, but less frequently. Their phone conversations became shorter and more tense. She started asking me casual questions about criminal law and whether people could lose their assets if they were convicted of fraud. "Just something I saw on the news," she said when I asked why she was curious. It made me wonder how these things work. "It depends on the specific charges," I told her, "but generally speaking, convicted felons can lose everything. Their assets can be seized, their professional licenses revoked, their reputations destroyed. It's very difficult to recover from that kind of scandal." I watched her face carefully as I spoke, and I could see her processing the implications. If Alan was convicted, he wouldn't be able to provide the financial security she was looking for. In fact, being associated with him could damage her own reputation in our social circle. The second part of my strategy involved Melissa, Lisa's best friend and co-conspirator. Marcus had discovered that Melissa wasn't just helping Lisa with her affair. She was also embezzling money from the charity organization where she worked as treasurer. Melissa had been skimming small amounts from fundraising events for months, thinking no one would notice. She was wrong. A few anonymous tips to the charity's board of directors led to an internal audit that quickly exposed her theft. The scandal broke just as our neighborhood was planning its annual charity gala, the same event Lisa claimed to be organizing with Alan. Suddenly, Melissa was persona non grata in our social circle, and anyone associated with her was viewed with suspicion. Lisa tried to distance herself from Melissa, but the damage was done. People began questioning Lisa's involvement in the charity work, wondering if she'd known about the embezzlement. The whispers and speculation made Lisa increasingly paranoid and isolated. "I can't believe Melissa would steal from charity," Lisa said one evening, pacing around our living room. "I mean, I knew she had money problems, but I never thought she'd do something like that." "People can surprise you," I said mildly. "Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who betray us. But we've been friends for years. I thought I knew her." "Maybe you didn't know her as well as you thought. Maybe she was hiding things from you, living a secret life you never suspected." Lisa stopped pacing and looked at me sharply, as if she heard something in my tone. For a moment, I thought she might confess everything, might break down and tell me the truth about her affair. Instead, she just nodded and said, "You're right. You never really know someone, do you?" "No," I agreed. "You don't." The third prong of my attack was the most personal. I began systematically undermining Alan's position in our social circle, using the same networks and relationships he'd been exploiting to get close to my wife. I started by having quiet conversations with our neighbors about Alan's legal troubles. I didn't gossip or spread rumors. I just expressed concern for a friend who seemed to be going through a difficult time. "I'm worried about Alan," I'd say. "He seems really stressed lately, and I heard he's having some business problems. I hope he's not in serious trouble." Because I was known as a trustworthy, reliable neighbor, people took my concerns seriously. They began watching Alan more carefully, noticing his erratic behavior and obvious anxiety. Some started avoiding him altogether, not wanting to be associated with whatever scandal was brewing. I also used my professional connections to make Alan's legal situation worse. I couldn't directly interfere with his case. That would be unethical and illegal. But I could make sure he didn't get the best possible representation. When Alan started looking for a criminal defense attorney, I quietly reached out to the best lawyers in Dallas and mentioned that I might have a conflict of interest with anyone representing him. Since my law firm was large and well-connected, most of the top attorneys decided they couldn't risk taking Alan as a client. He ended up with a second-tier lawyer who was competent but not exceptional. In a complex fraud case like his, that could make the difference between a plea bargain and serious prison time. As Alan's situation deteriorated, I watched Lisa struggle with the implications. She'd invested months in this affair, risking her marriage and family for a man who was now looking like a liability rather than an asset. The stress was taking its toll on her. She was losing weight, sleeping poorly, and snapping at the kids over minor issues. Her carefully maintained appearance was starting to show cracks: missed hair appointments, chipped nail polish, designer clothes that didn't fit quite right anymore. One evening, she came home from what she claimed was a book club meeting, looking particularly upset. "Rough discussion?" I asked. "What?" "Oh, yes. We were reading a very emotional book about betrayal and loss." "Sounds heavy. What's it called?" She hesitated, clearly not having expected the question. It's called The Price of Secrets. You probably wouldn't like it." I nodded sympathetically. "I'm sure I wouldn't. I prefer stories where people get what they deserve in the end." "What do you mean?" "You know, where the good guys win and the bad guys face consequences for their actions. I've always believed that justice prevails eventually, even if it takes time." Lisa stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was starting to wonder if I knew more than I was letting on, starting to question whether her secret was as safe as she'd thought. Good. Let her wonder, let her worry, let her start to understand what it felt like to live with uncertainty and fear. Because this was just the beginning. I had much more planned for both Lisa and Alan, and by the time I was finished, they'd both understand exactly what it meant to crawl. 3 weeks after Alan's legal troubles became public knowledge, Lisa made a decision that confirmed everything I'd suspected about her character. Instead of ending the affair and trying to repair our marriage, she doubled down on her betrayal. I came home from work early one Thursday to find her in our bedroom, packing a suitcase. "Going somewhere?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. She jumped, clearly not having heard me come in. "Oh, you startled me. Melissa needs me to come stay with her for a few days. She's having a really hard time with everything that's happened." I almost laughed at the audacity of the lie. Melissa had been arrested 2 days earlier for embezzlement and was currently out on bail, staying with her parents in Fort Worth. There was no way Lisa was going to comfort her. "That's thoughtful of you," I said. "I'm sure she appreciates having such a loyal friend." "She does. She really does." Lisa continued packing, avoiding eye contact. "I'll probably be gone through the weekend. Can you handle things with the kids?" "Of course. Family comes first, right?" She nodded quickly, then paused in her packing. "Ryan, I want you to know that I appreciate everything you do for our family. You're a good father and a good provider." It sounded almost like goodbye, and I realized that Lisa might be planning more than just a weekend away. She might be preparing to leave permanently, to file for divorce and start her new life with Alan, despite his legal troubles. "Lisa," I said quietly, "is there something you want to tell me?" For a moment she looked like she might break down and confess everything. Her eyes filled with tears, and her hands shook as she folded a dress. "No," she said finally. "Nothing important. I love you, Ryan. I want you to know that." "I love you too," I replied, and meant it. Despite everything she'd done, part of me still loved the woman I'd married, even if that woman no longer existed. After Lisa left, I called Marcus and confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't going to Melissa's. She was meeting Alan at a cabin he'd rented in East Texas, about 2 hours from Dallas. They were planning to spend the weekend discussing their future together, trying to figure out how to handle his legal situation and her divorce. That gave me the perfect opportunity to implement the next phase of my plan. Friday evening, I arranged for my parents to watch Jake and Emma, telling them I had to work late on an important case. Then I drove to the cabin where Lisa and Alan were hiding out. I didn't go there to confront them directly. Instead, I parked down the road and called Lisa's cell phone. "Ryan?" She sounded panicked. "Is everything okay? Are the kids all right?" "The kids are fine," I said. "They're with my parents. I called because I wanted to talk to you about something important." "What is it? Can't it wait until I get home?" "I'm afraid not. Lisa, I know about the affair." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "What are you talking about?" "I know about you and Alan. I know about the hotel rooms, the lies, the weekend getaways. I know you're with him right now at that cabin on Lake Cherokee." I heard her gasp, then the sound of movement and muffled voices. She was probably telling Alan that I'd found out. "Ryan, I can explain." "No," I interrupted. "You can't explain. There's no explanation for what you've done to our family, to our children, to me. But I want you to know that I'm not the naive, trusting husband you thought I was." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've known about your affair for weeks. I've been documenting everything, gathering evidence, preparing for what comes next." "What? What comes next?" "That depends on you. You can come home right now, end this relationship with Alan, and we can try to work things out in counseling, or you can stay there with your boyfriend and deal with the consequences." "What consequences?" I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "Alan hasn't told you about his legal troubles, has he? About the fraud investigation? The criminal charges he's facing? The possibility of prison time?" Another long silence, then. "He said it was just a misunderstanding, that it would all be cleared up soon. Lisa, the man you're throwing away your marriage for is going to be indicted for wire fraud, mortgage fraud, and money laundering. He's looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison. Is that really the future you want?" I could hear her crying now, and part of me felt genuinely sorry for her. She'd been manipulated by Alan just as much as I had, seduced by his lies and false promises. "But even if you don't care about his legal problems," I continued, "you should know that I've been preparing for this moment for weeks. I've moved most of our assets beyond your reach, documented your infidelity, and gathered evidence that will ensure I get custody of the children." "You can't do that." "I can, and I have. The trust fund I set up for the kids' education? That money is gone, Lisa. The investments I made in the law firm? Those aren't marital assets. The evidence I have of your affair and your lies? That's going to make any divorce very expensive for you." "This isn't fair." "Fair," I laughed, and there was no humor in it. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you started sleeping with my best friend? Was it fair when you mocked our marriage to him? Was it fair when you planned to take half of everything I've worked for to fund your new life?" She was sobbing now, and I could hear Alan in the background demanding to know what was happening. "You have a choice, Lisa. Come home tonight alone, and we'll try to salvage our marriage. Stay there with Alan, and I'll file for divorce first thing Monday morning. What's it going to be?" I need time to think." "You've had months to think. You've made your choices, and now you have to live with them. I'll give you until midnight to decide. After that, the offer is off the table." I hung up and sat in my car, watching the cabin. Through the windows, I could see Lisa and Alan having what looked like a very heated argument. She was gesturing wildly, and he was pacing back and forth, running his hands through his hair. At 11:47 p.m., Lisa came out of the cabin alone, threw her suitcase in her car, and drove away without looking back. Alan stood in the doorway watching her leave, and even from a distance, I could see the defeat in his posture. I followed Lisa home, staying far enough back that she wouldn't notice me. When she pulled into our driveway, I was right behind her. She was waiting for me on the front porch, her face streaked with tears and her hair disheveled. "I chose you," she said simply. "I chose our family." "No," I replied, walking past her to unlock the front door. "You chose what was best for you, just like you always do. But it's too late, Lisa. I meant what I said about the midnight timeline. But I'm here, I left him. You left him because you realized he couldn't give you what you wanted. You didn't choose me, you just decided I was the better option. I opened the door and stepped inside, leaving her standing on the porch. Ryan, please, we can work this out, I'll do anything. I turned to look at her one last time, this woman I'd loved for 12 years, this woman who'd betrayed me so completely. The only thing you can do now, I said quietly, is crawl. Then I closed the door and left her standing in the dark, finally understanding that her perfect plan had become her perfect nightmare. But I wasn't done with either of them yet, not by a long shot. The divorce papers were filed Monday morning, and by Tuesday afternoon, Lisa realized just how thoroughly I'd outmaneuvered her. Her lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in high-asset divorces, delivered the bad news during what Lisa had expected to be a strategy session. I have to be honest with you, Lisa, Patricia said, according to the recording device I'd hidden in Lisa's purse. Your husband has structured this very cleverly. Most of your marital assets have been moved into vehicles that won't be subject to equitable distribution. What does that mean? It means instead of walking away with half of everything, you're looking at maybe 20%. And that's if we can prove some of these transfers were made in bad faith. But that's not fair. I'm entitled to half. You would be, under normal circumstances, but your husband is a very good lawyer, and he's had time to prepare. The trust fund for the children, the investments in his law firm, the early debt payments, they're all perfectly legal. I was listening to this conversation from my office, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't experienced since the early days of my legal career. Lisa had spent months planning to take me for everything I was worth, and now she was discovering that I'd been planning too. But the financial blow was just the beginning. The real destruction came when I released the evidence of her affair to our social circle. I didn't do it crudely or obviously. Instead, I let the information leak out gradually, in ways that seemed natural and inevitable. A photo left accidentally visible on my phone during a neighborhood barbecue. A conversation with Tom Henderson where I mentioned my marriage troubles and let him draw his own conclusions. A casual comment to another neighbor about how difficult it was to trust people. Within a week, everyone in our subdivision knew that Lisa had been cheating on me with Alan. The same social network she'd used to maintain her perfect image became the vehicle for her public humiliation. The reaction was swift and brutal. Lisa found herself excluded from social gatherings, dropped from volunteer committees, and subjected to the kind of whispered conversations and knowing looks that make suburban life unbearable. But the cruelest blow came from an unexpected source: our children. Jake and Emma weren't stupid. They'd noticed the tension in our house, the arguments their parents thought they couldn't hear, the way their mother had been absent so much lately. When Lisa tried to explain that Daddy and Mommy were getting divorced, 10-year-old Emma asked a question that cut straight to the heart of the matter. "Is it because you have a boyfriend, Mommy?" Lisa's face went white. "What? Emma? Why would you ask that?" "Because Sarah's mom had a boyfriend, and that's why Sarah's parents got divorced. Tommy Henderson said you have a boyfriend too." Lisa looked at me desperately, silently pleading for help, but I just sat there and let her struggle with the consequences of her choices. It's complicated, sweetheart. Sometimes adults make mistakes." "Did you make a mistake, Mommy?" "Yes," Lisa whispered. "I made a big mistake." That night, after the kids were in bed, Lisa cornered me in my home office. "You're turning our children against me," she accused. "I'm not doing anything," I replied without looking up from my laptop. "I'm just not protecting you from the consequences of your actions anymore. They're going to hate me. Maybe. Or maybe they'll learn an important lesson about honesty and loyalty. How can you be so cold? I know I hurt you, but we have children together. Doesn't that mean anything?" I finally looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But then I remembered the recordings of her mocking our marriage, the photos of her with Alan, the months of lies and deception. "You should have thought about the children before you started your affair," I said. "You should have thought about them before you decided to destroy our family for your own selfish desires. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far, and now we all have to live with the consequences." While Lisa was dealing with social exile and the loss of her children's respect, Alan was facing even worse problems. The federal investigation into his real estate fraud had expanded, and prosecutors were now looking at potential RICO charges that could result in decades in prison. His lawyer had advised him to consider a plea bargain, but Alan was still clinging to the hope that he could beat the charges. He'd been calling Lisa constantly, begging her to stand by him, promising that everything would work out if she just had faith. Lisa, however, had finally realized that Alan was a sinking ship. She'd stopped taking his calls and had even changed her phone number to avoid his increasingly desperate messages. The final blow to their relationship came when Alan, facing financial ruin from his legal bills, asked Lisa to loan him money from her divorce settlement. "He actually had the nerve to ask me for money," Lisa told her sister during a phone call I was monitoring. "Money I don't even have yet, money I might never have. After everything he's put me through, he still thinks I'm going to bail him out." "What did you tell him?" "I told him to go to hell. I'm done, Sarah. I'm done with him, done with this whole mess. I just want to try to salvage what's left of my life." But there wasn't much left to salvage. Lisa's reputation was destroyed, her finances were limited, and her relationship with our children was strained beyond repair. She'd traded a stable, comfortable life for a fantasy that had turned into a nightmare. The irony wasn't lost on me. Lisa had been attracted to Alan partly because he seemed more exciting than her boring, predictable husband. She'd wanted passion and adventure, and she'd gotten it, just not the kind she'd been expecting. As for Alan, his downfall was complete. He was indicted on 14 federal charges, lost his real estate license, and had his assets seized by the government. The man who'd thought he could steal my wife and my money ended up with nothing but a prison sentence and a destroyed reputation. 6 months after I'd first overheard Lisa's whispered phone conversation, both she and Alan had lost everything they'd cared about. Their affair had cost them their reputations, their financial security, their social standing, and their futures. I, on the other hand, had emerged from the wreckage stronger than ever. I had custody of my children, control of my assets, and the respect of my community. Most importantly, I had the satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served. Lisa moved into a small apartment across town, taking a job as a receptionist at a medical office to pay her bills. Alan was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison and ordered to pay millions in restitution to his victims. As I watched them both struggle with the consequences of their betrayal, I felt no sympathy, no regret, no desire to help them rebuild their shattered lives. They'd wanted to watch me crawl, to see me broken and defeated while they rode off into their perfect sunset together. Instead, they were the ones crawling now, and I was the one standing tall, watching them get exactly what they deserved.